In user experience research, the definition of youth requires strict boundaries. A teenager is aged 13 to 18. The young adult demographic covers ages 18 to 25, and observational data shows they exhibit entirely different web behaviors than the teenage cohort. Because young adults grew up in a media-saturated world, many product teams assume they require interfaces that are gamified, highly social, and packed with interactive multimedia to hold their attention. But empirical testing reveals a sharp contrast. When asked to identify a standard for a good digital experience, young adults consistently point to interfaces like the Google homepage. They gravitate towards extreme minimalist layouts, heavily favoring white space and a single, obvious functional input. Lifelong exposure to digital technology hasn't produced a generation of tech wizards. Instead, it has cultivated a highly impatient demographic that demands absolute functional simplicity to achieve their specific goals. The assumption that digital natives intuitively understand complex technology directly harms modern interaction design. Relying on this stereotype leads product teams to build overly complicated, non-standard interfaces that frustrate users. This demographic operates with high self-confidence but a complete lack of patience. If an interface doesn't work exactly as expected, they rarely blame themselves or look for instructions. They simply assume the site is broken and leave. To build effective products for the 18 to 25 demographic, we have to look past the stereotypes and examine actual behavioral data. By observing how they navigate digital spaces, we can isolate exactly where prevailing usability assumptions break down. Designing for this cohort requires abandoning demographic generalizations and grounding architectural decisions in documented usability testing. The first major assumption is that young adults easily adapt to clever or novel interface patterns because of their technological fluency. In practice, they are extremely error-prone. They move through interfaces so quickly they skip detailed instructions and lack patience to troubleshoot technical errors. This behavior causes a UI failure on the Australian passport website. A link reads, "Complete and print an Australian passport adult application." Because of aggressive keyword scanning, users spot complete, click, and incorrectly assume it leads to an online form instead of a pre-qualification step. Compare with this Dell interface. It maps OS choices to user goals instead of raw specs. Abstracting technical details into functional outcomes keeps users engaged. By removing the cognitive effort of decoding jargon, young adults are far less likely to abandon the task. Forcing this demographic to learn a non-standard interaction pattern is an immediate bounce risk. They expect predictability, and they will consistently choose a competitor site over spending time learning a new way to navigate yours. High literacy does not equal a high tolerance for reading. Interfaces targeting this demographic must be ruthless in their clarity, rely on established design patterns, and get straight to the point. A second common assumption suggests that interfaces targeting young adults must be loud, highly social, and dense with multimedia content. Young adults actively disdain auto-playing video and audio unless it directly serves their immediate task. They view corporate websites as functional tools, not as entertainment hubs. This disconnect is obvious with social sharing integrations. On this mobile site, bright pink sharing icons occupy the bottom viewport. They consume valuable real estate, yet are universally ignored. To share an article, young adults bypass these completely, copying the direct URL into private chats. Successful social integration exists in e-commerce. Urban Outfitters embeds an Instagram feed on the product page, showing a real customer wearing the item. This succeeds through utility. Peer evidence proves a product's real-world fit, providing value without asking users to broadcast their shopping habits. Young adults maintain strict boundaries between their personal social networks and corporate entities. Organizations shouldn't try to manufacture social interactions on their sites. They should simply deliver the information the user is looking for. A third assumption dictates that users navigate site architectures in a linear fashion, clicking a link, reading a page, and hitting the back button. The actual dominant information retrieval strategy for the 18 to 25 cohort is a behavior known as page parking. This flowchart illustrates page parking. One young adult researching a car spawned 16 tabs from one search page in 90 seconds. This two-stage process begins with a rapid mass triage of links from a central hub. Then they systematically evaluate each parked tab. Site architectures built purely for a linear narrative flow directly frustrate this workflow. Forcing a user to navigate back and forth continuously breaks their context and slows down their rapid evaluation process. To support page parking, content hierarchies must be layered. Core narrative information should stay on the main page, while tangential or supplementary details should be isolated. This allows users to open that secondary information in a new tab without losing their place on the hub page. Building sites strictly for linear traversal inherently fights against the primary complexity management tool used by young adults. This chart visualizes survey data on design preferences. The 18 to 25 demographic shows a significant preference for flat, minimalist design compared to older generations. Flat design lets the interface get out of the way of the content. They don't want heavy drop shadows. They want immediate clarity. This demand for clarity extends to the tone of the copy. This cohort possesses a hyper-tuned detector for inauthenticity and marketing spin. When corporate brands attempt to sound artificially cool, force colloquialisms, or unnecessarily gamify functional workflows, the result is heavily criticized. Young adults perceive these tactics as desperate and patronizing. Capturing the 18 to 25 demographic successfully requires an overarching design philosophy rooted in respect for their time. Interaction patterns must be standard and predictable. Functional simplicity will always outperform a complex UI that requires a learning curve. Copy must be ruthlessly scannable, stripping out unnecessary jargon. The underlying site architecture must support tab-heavy workflows by allowing users to easily park and compare information. Product teams need to stop designing for the stereotype of a distracted teenager. Design for a highly goal-oriented, impatient adult who wants to complete their task and move on.